In March of 1955, the station moved into what would be its home for more than 40 years, on a corner of the Washington University campus at Millbrook and Big Bend, the first facility in the United States built to house a public television station. A painting, Education Through Television, by St. Louis artist Fred Conway, covered most of a wall in the foyer. Today it hangs in the downtown St. Louis Public Library. Inscribed on another wall was wisdom from the Book of Proverbs, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." That spring, Channel 9 opened its doors to its viewers, including many of those who had gone door to door to raise money the year before. A procession of the curious filed through the studio, eager for a peek behind the curtain of television's magic. A Post-Dispatch photographer was there that day, capturing the reaction of visitors as they stood before the cameras and watched themselves on the studio monitors.
Civil defense problem here is that this bomber, if it drops an H-bomb on the area...
KETC had a plan, broadcast educational courses during the day for schools, and entertaining shows for kids after school.
Hello, boys and girls. Today on Here and There, your teacher, Mrs. Sally Grayson, is going to take you up in the air and out into outer space.
Hello, boys and girls. The man you've been seeing is not really a man from Mars, but he certainly looks like it, doesn't he? He's really...
Evenings, the station would air insightful, socially relevant programs, boldly, perhaps naively, competing with Ed Sullivan, The Honeymooners, and I Love Lucy. Even though stations swapped programs through the National Educational Television Network, a precursor to PBS, they were very much on their own when it came to creating local shows. But Channel 9, in its first year, produced a hit.
Sonny Fox searches the world for interesting people, places, and things. When he finds them, he brings them before his television cameras for you to see. That's why he's called The Finder.
We just didn't know what educational television was going to be. We didn't know what television was going to be. We didn't know what we were going to be. But it was a great time. It was a very exciting time because nobody could tell us what we couldn't do because nobody knew what we could do. And if you flopped, went back the next day and did it again. It wasn't the end of your career.
Hi. Well, I'm the Finder, and this week, as every week, I've been out chasing around in my Corvette, my airplane, finding unusual things and interesting people and exciting places. And I guess that's why, although my name is Sonny Fox, I'm called the Finder.
Mr. Fox! Oh, Mr. Fox!
You know, that sounds like Henry the Hummingbird, my friend.
I think this is probably a great definition of chutzpah. Here I am in St. Louis, and it was the second year the Corvette was being assembled in St. Louis. Called up the man who was in charge of distribution of Corvettes in this area. I said, here's the deal. Give me a Corvette for a year. I will feature it every day at the opening for a program that's going to be seen on a station that's not yet on the air, that's an educational station, and a show that's aimed at 6 to 12-year-olds. That's the deal. And for some strange reason, the man said, okay. I had a Corvette.
And, largely by accident, the Finder provided the first clue that somebody out there was watching.
We did a show on spelunking, cave exploration. And I got the idea, say, well, you know, I worked with those people at the Onondaga Caves. I said, well, if we brought people out, would you do that? So we set up a whole way of doing that one day. And I announced on the air that, you know, if you wanted to go out, you know, write in, we'd send you a ticket and you could go out and then it would be free and all that. But when I drove out that day and found that there were maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people out there at the Onondaga Caves, all our minds were boggled. We really did not know. It was the first time I understood, number one, that we had an audience, but more importantly, that we had the power to move people. We had the power to get them out of their homes, away from their television sets, and actually make them go somewhere of a nature like the Onondaga Cave. That was the beginning of what I think is a sort of a lifetime arc of a challenge of how to use the power of television for more than just selling products.
I figured that you were the one to help me.
Well, I'd be glad to help you. What do you want?
Well,
Educational stations across the country picked up the Finder, And before the end of the first season, Sonny was tapped by CBS, the start of a brilliant career in network television.
There's something about St. Louis that almost despite ourselves, we're able to come up with things of quality. And then we let them go. Charlie Guggenheim, Sonny Fox. But, once they're identified and once they do their stuff, others identify them and steal them away.
And yet, in its first year, KETC produced more programs for national distribution than any other educational station, largely because of Washington University's willingness to lend the talents of its own staff. The university paid the salary of Mayo Simon, who produced Religions of Man, hosted by Professor Houston Smith, an early national model of educational television excellence. Simon also produced Soapbox, hosted by Rand Lincoln, exploring such local issues as poverty, racism, and social justice. Soapbox broke new ground in television programming.
This is the slum. It covers 1/4 of the city. The casual visitor, the tourist, the driver who's lost his way, will come through these streets without stopping, but his eye and his ear will pick up impressions which he'll not soon forget. Good evening. My name's Rand Lincoln. Tonight we're going to talk about bad housing and meet some of the people who live in bad housing.
But the paint was hardly dry on the walls of the new building before the station faced potential financial ruin. In the spring of 1955, the board, believing it had gone to the well too often, voted to stop public fund drives, prompting cuts in production and layoffs.
I was really very sad because all of these fine young people were there with their families and had to sell their homes and go to all different places, different parts of the country to get jobs again.
So in addition to a mural and words of biblical wisdom, there was some new handwriting on the wall of Channel 9. Shows cost money, and good shows cost a lot of money. There were other well-produced shows when funds were available. Science and Human Responsibility, hosted by Arthur Holly Compton, explored the question of how science could better serve humanity. Compton's personal interest in the subject stemmed from his role as a physicist in the creation of the atomic bomb. Free Assembly was a regional electronic town hall meeting, taking on issues many as touchy today as they were in the late 50s.
Rand Lincoln, Chairman, has called the Assembly to order.
Order, please. Order, please. The Assembly will now come to order. The fifth pre-Assembly is now in session. The question before the Assembly tonight is residential segregation.
I'm not going to move into a colored neighborhood, and I'm not going to move into a mixed neighborhood.
Well, that's all well and good. Times are changing, and as times change, laws have to change.
If times change, the laws change. When we have somebody to destroy the Constitution of the United States, the basis that our laws is drawn on, my God, what would happen to you or I?
In television studios, this is the sign for stretch. And if you're on camera, you don't like to see it because it means we have more time than material. Make it up. Stretch. Well, by the late 1950s, somebody at Channel 9 was...
Let's have a look at where we're doing this series. The studio of KETC. Here, a cameraman responsible for the visual part of this program. And here, the floor director, responsible for seeing everything in the studio is going as the director wants it to go. Over here, we have a musician, John Stauber. He will furnish background music for some of the programs. There are many other engineers and technicians in the studio, all concerned with producing this program. to help you learn more about the city of St. Louis. This will be the stool where I'll be sitting, and this the backdrop, and here my clipboard with the notes that I'll use in helping tell you about the city around us. Let's light the set and get set.
And of course there were those moments that only live television can provide.
One of the notable programs had to do with the history of jazz. When this jazz group was in the studio, and I suppose one of the musicians had imbibed a bit too much before the broadcast, and the heat was stifling, the lights were intense, and the cameraman expertly panned as one of the musicians just passed out and slowly fell to the ground.
The public schools, which contributed a major portion of the station's budget, saw in-school television as a way to relieve the mounting teacher shortage as the baby boom exhausted their resources. It seemed logical. Educate through educational television. But in an age before TiVo or even video cassettes, schools had to arrange their class schedules around the station's broadcast schedule, which few were willing to do. Whatever the future held seemed anybody's guess.
Someday, you too are going to go in a jet maybe, or maybe even someday when you're grown up or your children are grown up, you'll get to fly on a rocket ship that might take you as far away as the moon, which is very far.
Sometimes the station's meager resources forced it to be more creative. In the late 50s, decades before anyone talked about interactive television, the program Metroplex encouraged viewers to create listening posts, places for neighbors to gather and watch panelists discuss issues, and then do something no television station today would ever ask its viewers to do.
At the end of Phase 1, we'll ask you to turn off your set, discuss the merits of the views you've heard, and phone in your reactions, your suggestions, and your questions. Then after 1 hour, we'll be back again for Phase 2 of the assembly. These same witnesses will be here to answer the questions you phoned in.
By 1964, though, most viewers were turning off KETC through lack of interest in its programs or inability to pick up the weak signal. And when it seemed things could not get worse, the Globe Democrat in the spring of 1965 ran a series of articles accusing acting general manager Robert Nissen of having communist associations. The paper charged that KETC had aired programs distributed by the National Educational Television Network that were soft on communism. The charges were devastating for Nissen, his family, and KETC. Nissen resigned. In 11 years, 8 general managers had come and gone. There was no rush among the qualified to become number 9. It had been a noble experiment. They fought the good fight. But it looked as if it were over, and the station's board was seriously considering sending Channel 9's license back to the FCC.